Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation. First of all, I'm very glad to be here because I see many friendly faces. So thank you to DAD for the invitation, but also to the other partners of ECOLOPES, such as Ferdinand and Annalena, which is also my colleague at work. So it's a nice combination. So today I will talk about productive landscapes, or at least how within the practice of our studio we conceive the productivity of landscape that is much related to the green transition, of course. And I will also briefly what we do in the research lab. So LAND stands for Landscape Architecture Nature Development, is a company founded in Milan and Düsseldorf 30 years ago, approximately. And we have been growing quite a lot in the past 3 years. So we are now 120 people across the 4 countries. And we are developing several landscape projects all around Europe and also abroad, such as in Middle East and in Canada. Our work extends from park design, that is maybe classical output for landscape architects, but also to industrial regeneration sites, infrastructure mitigation, and ecological restorations. Of course, one of the main challenges that we are facing is the climate emergency. That is a everyday life challenge nowadays. So we have been experiencing how in the past years many regions across Europe and the world are facing this challenge, not only in terms of floodings, but also in terms of heat waves and drought, as we are experiencing also in Italy in the last months. This map is showing quite clearly how in very different contexts these challenges are affecting the perception of climate and also the climate dynamics themselves. So for example, here we have the situation of 10 days in July 2022, and we see how in Baden-Württemberg, that is a region in southwest Germany, and Lombardy, that is the region of Milan, the temperature hit quite high value constantly in the middle of last summer. This is something that is broadly documented by the scientific community. Maybe you got to know that in March, the IPCC synthesis report was published, and there is this quite expressive graphic showing how future generation and the actual generations will be affected by climate change in the next century, at least. And we see that temperatures are constantly rising, but of course, the challenges that are occurring through this increase of temperature is also in terms of well-being and health of people. All across the world, there have been movements, also civic movements, to act against climate change, or at least to promote climate adaptation, to reduce emissions. So, of course, there have been official conferences, such as the several COPs, but also there was increasing awareness among people how everyone can really impact on climate change with solutions that most of the time are, of course, taking advantage of nature to improve the quality of life in our cities. One of our reference frameworks is, of course, the European policy. So in 2019, the European Green Deal was launched. It's a quite ambitious plan to turn Europe into a climate neutral continent by 2050. It sounds very promising, but also it requires a lot of efforts, not only for politicians or for public institutions, but also for the practitioners who are active in transforming our cities through green areas, for example. Of course, the Green Deal was maybe at the right moment, because just after that, the pandemic came, as well also after that, the European Bauhaus was launched. And this was an accelerator for both strategies or programs, let's say. And the new European Bauhaus, I think it's a quite interesting benchmark that we have to consider as academics or practitioners, because it's the way we have to make tangible the European Green Deal, to really act within this broad program implementing solutions. In fact, one of the consequences was also an adaptation of the laws of the European Commission. For example, the natural restoration law, it's something that 20 years ago was hard to imagine, but now it's reality, and it's really pushing toward the implementation of goals that, for example, also the former biodiversity strategy to 2020 was aiming to, but was maybe not so effective to reach. These goals, of course, require an adaptation of the way we live, but also a way we design our cities. So practically, in the past decades, the main focus was the built environment, and then somewhen in the building process, already in the design process, we remember that there is also society and nature. And this it was quite hard to think if we integrate this workflow within the new approach that we are facing right now. In fact, many scientific studies, so not only best practices in the professional world, have shown how the green transition, in order to be green, so ecological, should start from nature and from the living environment, and building solutions that are working, first of all, for people, and then, of course, are also supporting the economy, but not the other way around. At the Research Lab, we have a multidisciplinary team that is dealing or trying to deal with all these challenges. So one of the key factors of our team is that we come from different backgrounds. So we have landscape architects, we have architects, we have urban planners, we have geographers, and we have agronomers. And we work all together on different projects that are basically classifiable under 4 typologies. So we develop consultancy solutions that come from the research outcomes that we develop within the lab, and then can be deployed in the design projects of the studio. We work in research and innovation projects. So we are currently partner of 3 Horizon projects and other initiatives. And then thanks to this involvement, we are also able to disseminate and raise awareness on environmental issues through lectures and other training programs. And finally, of course, also education that is not only education towards the outside, but also within our team. So we are also in charge for the internal training of our colleagues. How we work? Well, I have been mentioning the European Bauhaus. I think this approach is translating quite perfectly how we work. So it's a balance between participation, transdisciplinarity, and multi-level engagement. So of course, the participatory component, it's fundamental in our work. It's not maybe the usual practice that is belonging to the practitioners within architecture and landscape architecture. It should be, we would like to do that, but of course in normal projects it's quite hard to also include this part, and we have the opportunity to do that within EU-funded projects. And so this is quite a step forward also to bring innovation on the social component. The output of our research are both for public institutions, private institutions, and European projects. So we deliver different kinds of studies and tools or services, and we will see today some of them, and I hope they will be inspiring also for the work of ECOLOPES and other projects that you are dealing with. So our baseline is, of course, green, urban green. Green areas are able to improve the quality of life in cities thanks to their ecosystem services. And so here, I think we come already to the explanation why we are talking about productive landscapes. So productive landscapes in the sense that they are able to deliver services to people, but not only to people, to all stakeholders, human and not human, that are involved in a landscape project. Nature-based solutions are one of the solution, or maybe the main solution, that has been also backed and promoted by the European Commission since 2015. Several projects have been dealing with the topic, for example, ECOLOPES, but also UNaLab, that is one of the projects I will present today, and that realized a pilot here in Genova. Well, I guess that most of the people in this audience know what they are, but just to be clear, nature-based solution can be very small, like a pond, or very wide, like a urban park, or even restoration. And what is important is that they are no regret solutions, and they simultaneously provide environmental, social, and economic benefits. So I think this is one of the main factors that define a nature-based solution in comparison to a green space that is not delivering the same services. And the other important aspect is that nature-based solutions are usually conceived within a project cycle. There has been several European projects since 2015 working on nature-based solutions, so there are also different models. All of them are valuable, of course, but there are also some common components that are characterized by co-management, co-creation, and co-implementation. So there is always this process tied with the community, or at least with the key stakeholders, that is starting with the co-creation and then getting till to the co-maintenance and co-management of the solution in order to ensure their life cycle, and therefore to ensure that they are able to deliver their services as long as possible. If we try to summarize how we have learned to plan nature-based solution, we could define 3 steps. So understanding the ecosystem, that means a landscape analysis, so it's nothing new, it's what we should do every time, but also map who are the stakeholders, not only humans, but also non-human stakeholders. So I will get to this point later in the presentation, but I'm talking about plants and animals that are among the inhabitants of our cities as we are. So if you imagine that there are countries such as New Zealand who developed a law to protect the rights of rivers, maybe there is already someone in this world that is progressing in this sense, and we should really rethink how we conceive our open spaces and shift the human-centric perspective into a new, more inclusive one. And what is very important is also to define the challenges. So during the landscape analysis, what is important is to define which are the challenges that I want to target with specific services that are benefits. In fact, the second steps are the benefits, and thanks to the benefits, I'm able to select the network-based solution, to adapt them to the specific context and to prototype them. A key step is to define users and ambassadors who are the ones able to maintain them. So we are talking about living systems, and so living systems need care and need someone who is able to use them, but also to protect them and to feed them across time. So living systems are complex systems. Another challenge that we faced as landscape architects was to identify methodology to work with dynamic systems. Many of the procedures that have been taught to architects were referring to static system, that is architecture, but nature is growing, nature is changing, and it's evolving, and it's unpredictable. So we have been able through European projects, but also own initiatives to understand which are possible paths to control or at least manage this dynamic component. And this is coming from our previous experience as, let's say, traditional landscape architects. So land has a quite broad portfolio of projects. For example, the North Park in Milan is one of the biggest ecosystem recoveries in urban areas. It was started in 1975 and is nowadays stretching in a wide sector of the north of the city of Milan, involving several municipalities in a consortium that is managing the park. Another example is the Bartesacchi Park in Sondrio, that is one of the main valleys of the Alps north of Milan. And here we recovered the former quarry along the river, and we created the river park that is reconnecting the city of Sondrio with its river. Or in this region, that is Liguria, we have been involved in this very interesting project after a railway has been dismissed, and we planned a bicycle route with the linear park that is now allowing people to take advantage of the waterfront instead of hosting just the infrastructure. Or finally, this is, I think, maybe the most eradicated example that we have in our DNA at land, that is recovering industrial brownfields in city. This is in Milano again. It's the former Falk steel factory that after many years is now developing a new master plan, and soon will start the recovery of the area, such as happened in Essen from 2009. This is the former Krupp factory that our colleagues in Düsseldorf have transformed into a new urban park, recovering the former waste site of the factory, that was this one, and turning the factory into the new headquarters of ThyssenKrupp, but with a very integrated landscape, not only in terms of reuse of resources, but also in terms of accessibility for everyone in the city, where, for example, the rainwater coming from the headquarters is collected through this bioswale and then into this reservoir. And underneath these mounds, there are some excavation soils that have been extracted from the site during the building process, and we wanted to avoid additional emissions to recover them somewhere else. So you see that is a circular management also of the resources within the site. And this is how it's nowadays. So another strategy that we are very determined to bring forward is unsealing our cities, not only because the recent heat waves that made many people aware of how asphalt and concrete can really decrease our quality of life during summer, but also because we want to reconnect people with nature also through a more integrated management of rainwater and to let trees live in a more healthy environment, let's say. So to do that, a great opportunity came with the UNaLab project that was funded by Horizon 2020 and ended just in November last year. We were 29 partners, and we happily also collaborated with the University of Genova for the monitoring of the living lab in Genova itself. So the aim of the project was increasing water and climate resilience in cities. There were 3 pilot projects: Eindhoven, Genova, and Tampere, so very different contexts geographically, but also culturally and in terms of urban structure and urban history. And in Genova in particular, we had the opportunity to develop solutions for Mediterranean cities. When we started the project in 2017, most of the nature-based solutions that we could find on catalogs and scientific publication were related to Northern Europe. So most of them were unsuitable for the climate, but also for the urban structure of a dense city like Genova or like any other Italian or Spanish city or French city that or Greek city that you know are very, very dense, and so it's not so easy to find spaces then to integrate green areas where the buildings are already established. Genova was the perfect case study because has a quite high population compressed in a very tiny piece of land between sea and mountains. And imagine that in the city center, the population density can reach 19,000 inhabitants per square kilometer, considering that in Germany, the densest city is Munich with 4,000. You can compare how challenging is working in such urban context. Well, it's quite clear that Genova had several challenges already before the project. So flooding were quite common because, as you can see from the picture in the middle, the city has been built exactly where it shouldn't, so along the riverbeds. Of course, because of the topography of the regions, not only because they were not aware of that. So this is the situation right now, and we have to live with the situation and adapt as much as possible the city to be habitable for at least other centuries, being Genova also a quite ancient city. In particular, the case study that we worked on is located here, slightly north of the main station and the harbor. And it's called the Lagaccio district. It's one of the densest and also most diverse neighborhoods in terms of social classes, not classes, social groups. and ethnical groups in the city. So topography, density, climate change, plus social diversity. It's quite an explosive mix. And in fact, it was quite a complex project, but we succeeded at least in delivering this first milestone of nature-based solution within a public park in the city. And we hope that it will be a reference for nicer and bigger projects like this in the area. So the project site, as I said, is located in this small valley between a natural protected area and the city harbor. And it was called, it is called the Lagaccio because it hosted a lake till the early 20s or 40s, as you can see here. Then the lake was dried up and we had a quite wild urbanization process in the 50s, 60s and 70s. So this caused a highly sealing rate, but also a lack of public spaces and green areas, accessible green areas in this neighborhood. The project site is located around an historical building that is the former Gavoglio Barrack. And you can see that underneath the building, 3 rivers are flowing. So they are underground and they are joining exactly underneath the area that was supposed to host the new park. With the European project, we were able to engage a quite broad diversity of stakeholders and to rethink the entire area with the different perspectives. So the first mission we had was to make space for nature, but also to understand which were the needs of the community. We have been working with ENOL, that was one of the project partners, that is the European Network of Living Labs, to shape the 3 pilot projects of UNaLab as urban living labs. So with also an innovation, an innovative approach in how we can then manage the nature-based solution with the stakeholders. So at the end, we came up with 12 different nature-based solutions that were located into the park. And this is the final design. So you can see that 5 buildings have been demolished and a quite tiny, but also quite diverse park has been realized, stretching from one side to the other of the neighborhood. So this park allowed also a double access that was not possible before. And imagine that across the area there are 70 meters of 8 gap. So it was an additional challenge to ensure accessibility also for everyone in the park. Here are some examples of the nature-based solutions that have been implemented in the past 2 years. So there are bioswale, there are vegetated gabions, there are tree block walls, and many of the materials that were found on site, for example, the stones from the ancient buildings of the barracks, have been reused also to pave some of the squares in the project. So here are some numbers. Basically, the idea was to increase vegetation as much as possible, decrease sealed surfaces as much as possible, and increase biodiversity as much as possible. It seems easy, but it was not easy because the area is very, very complex, not only for the reasons I've been mentioning, but also because during the project we have realized that most of it is laying on a stone platform. So in 2/3 of the park was not possible to infiltrate water. neither to plant trees. So this was quite a challenge, and so we had to be creative, including vegetation in gabions or creating green walls to mitigate this technical problem, let's say. Here are some visualization of the spaces that has been transformed. For example, this square became the playground and this building became the rain garden. And also we tried to connect the park with some public facilities such as a school. Yeah, and you can see how now the park is also part of the wider system that is aiming to reconnect not only in terms of landscape accessibility, but also in terms of ecological connections, the entire area. On the website of UNaLab, you can find also the Network-Based Solution Technical Handbook, where you can retrieve some valuable data about the performance of network-based solutions, and among them also the ones that we have implemented in Genova. This project, UNaLab, was for us a great opportunity to being aware of what landscape architects can do with network-based solution. Maybe we have been using network-based solution even before, but we were not aware that they were called like that, and the potential they had in delivering ecosystem services. In fact, after the project or during the project, we started to scale up the learnings of the project into other easiest cases, like, let's say. This is the first water park of the Lombardy region. It was realized in Arcore, that is a small city north of Milan. The area was a grassland with a severe problem of flooding every time that heavy rain came. And we had the opportunity to work on this project with a great technical partner that is the water utility of this area. So they were also our client. So we received a request to realize an infiltration basin, but then working and talking with them, we decided to avoid the building of a concrete basin. And so we tried to integrate this water facility into a landscape layout. So the infiltration basin is completely concrete free, let's say. And we realized a water playground, a picnic area, and some community gardens in order to reconnect the project site with the neighborhood. Here you can see how the basin is working in dry condition, and on the right in wet condition, let's say. For us, it was quite a surprise that we were able to avoid fences, for example. So you can see that kids can just walk and run in the meadow, and there is a siren, a sound alarm that is prevented people to get in danger when rainwater is coming and is flushing inside the basin. So yeah, this is not working because it's not a PowerPoint, but this temperature decrease and the buildings are getting full of plants. This was the animation. So thanks to these experiences, we really pushed hard to integrate vegetation in our projects. We are not working so much with buildings. Actually, we are working most of all with public space. And so, of course, the area of northern Italy for us is the perfect experimentation ground, because it's one of the most polluted area in Europe, one of the areas in Europe with the highest sealing rate, soil sealing rate. And so taking advantage of some past experiences, such as the Crew Park I've shown you before, we learned how landscape can really drive the transition into a more healthy and wealthy society. For example, in the rural area, we were part of several workshops and projects since the 1990s, where the IBA Hampshire, the Hampshire renaturation process started. And then this process that put landscape in the center of the regional regeneration process brought the rural region to become European capital of culture in 2010 and European Green Capital in 2017. So we are really convinced of the power of culture, of people, and the nature, that is landscape, to transform our regions in a better way. And this was for us a quite inspiring lesson, because we always try to compare and scale up solutions from different contexts. For example, the rural region that I've been mentioning is quite comparable to Milan metropolitan region, not only because the size is quite similar, but also because they have a similar industrial past, and they are going to host quite important territorial events in the next year that will bring investments and will bring infrastructural changes, and so impacts on the landscape. In Milan in particular, we have been able to build up a quite promising innovation ecosystem, working both with the research, with practitioners, with developers, and with the public realm. We are addressing the most urgent challenges concerning climate change and environmental degradation, such as extreme weather events, heat waves, air pollution, and ecosystem degradation. And therefore, we have been also providing targeted solutions to face them. One example I want to bring you from this area, I think two, because there's another one, is the Milan Innovation District. Maybe you have been to Expo, to the International Exhibition in 2015. This area has been transformed since then into the most important innovation district in Italy, and one of the most important in Europe. Of course, the process was quite long, because after the event, there was a public tender. We were part of the winning team together with Lend-Lease, that is the developer on site. And there was the big question, how can we turn this area into an innovation district that is, on the other hand, also sustainable in terms of ecological performances and connected with the surrounding communities. The area has been empty for a couple of years, and then the first dwellers came, for example, a resort center and a social foundation and the Lend-Lease, who is the developer. And we have been working with them on three main topics: meanwhile uses, dynamic topography, because the entire area it's a never-ending building site, and an experimental park that is a sort of anticipation of the future public park of the area. This is the master plan of 2018. There have been other 25 versions, so I cannot present you the newest one, because it's still under approval of the municipality, because it's a very big area, 1 million square meters, so many players, many challenges, and a constantly evolving debate on the master plan. But I think what is important here is that we were able to bring in the process also a European project, so research and innovation. This project is called the T-Factor and started in 2020. It's a project aiming to inquiry the transformative potential of minimal uses for urban regeneration. Of course, our contribution was to understand how urban nature can be included also in these temporary processes, and how the urban quality of such temporary spaces can be improved in such an uncertain context. We have been working. We have been working on several case studies. So the blue ones are the pilots of the project. Each of them is a urban regeneration site, and we have been working mainly with Milan, Bilbao, and Amsterdam. In each site, we had an overarching question that was leading our research activities. And we, as I said, tried to bring the landscape dynamic also in temporary spaces. For example, in Milan, there is a master plan that is leading the transformation on site, but this master plan is maybe very far away from the reality of people working in the area, but also far away from the micro scale of landscape dynamics of the green areas that are already present there. So here we have been working with the developer delivering a temporary landscape program that was intended to accompany the visitors or the I wouldn't say inhabitants, because no one is living there, the dwellers of this area from the main station to their workplace. And so from a quick sketch, it became reality, and we have also supported the developer in organizing big events to open up the site to the community, and also to export the temporary landscape into the city. For example, this was last year during the design week in Milan. So what does it mean then in practical terms? We have been both working on very temporary solutions, such as the trees you have seen on this concrete boulevard, but also we have been working on more stable solutions, such as rain gardens and outdoor working areas. And these are all small tiles that can help the developer and all the stakeholders to understand if the direction they have undertaken with the master plan is the correct one, or the solutions can teach them how it's possible to redirect then the master plan. Here we have been using innovative methodologies, at least innovative for the landscape design approach that we had. So we have been working with emotional mapping, involving different stakeholder groups. For example, asking them which were the perceptions they had in the landscape and how they imagine to transform a concrete slab into a garden, or being making them aware how many things could we do in sealed surfaces of the city that are underused nowadays. For example, this was the program in Milan. So we organized urban walks from the outside to the inside. Maybe if you look at the map with the eye of an urban planner, you get aware that the area is not exactly the most beautiful walk in the world. So it's not the waterfront of Liguria. It's a municipality that is encircled by big infrastructure and industrial areas. So it was really hard also to make people aware of the value of landscape in such a deprived context. But we were happy with the results. So we were able to map human perception, but also to map the non-human needs. And the output of this activity was a sense-making set of graphics that led us to deliver this place-making compass, that is a compass showing which are the potential areas where meanwhile uses related to landscape can be implemented, how these meanwhile uses could be hard or easy to realize, and in which time frame. And this is intended to be a tool for a developer or for the owner of the area to understand also which roadmap he could take. This process led us to implement more stable uses, or at least a prototype that might be replicated by the stakeholders on site. For example, we have organized a program called Biodiversity at Mind for Schools, where we have brought 8 classes of 2 different schools in the area, and we have built together some insect hotels, some bug hotels, and created also some seed bombs. And another activity that we are implementing and that will be opened in 3 weeks is this Civic Nature Biodiversity exhibition that will be displayed within one of the meadows of the area. In Amsterdam, we have been working on a similar topic, but in a context that is more established. It's the Amsterdam Science Park, so it's a research and university campus already existing with some areas that are not exactly ecologically sound or not attractive for people right now. So we have been working with different groups, mainly with university students, with a school, and also with some practitioners. And we created a hybrid approach to map biodiversity that is using existing scientific documents already available on site, citizen science tools such as iNaturalist, and through a participative workshop, we were able then to join the 2 knowledge fields, let's say, and make people more aware of the value of diversity and the possibility to increase this value with small solutions. To do this, we have been inspired by animal-aided design. I know that here we have some friends from Munich who are the fathers of the methodology, and this was very interesting for us to understand how really in different contexts animals can become stakeholders in the participatory process. So among the outputs, we delivered the biodiversity mapping that is documenting how citizen science can be also a tool to map biodiversity for non-experts, and then a portfolio of solutions that are actually conceived to be part of a workshop methodology. So we have a set of 3 cards: the animal portraits, the place cards, and the solutions card, that can be used by participants from different backgrounds to create their own small meanwhile use in the landscape. For example, here we built some salamander houses and similar solution with kids. And finally, in Bilbao, that is the 3rd pilot case we have been focusing on this project. There is a wide island in the middle of the river that was a former industrial area. And here we were asked to help the local cultural and creative industries to make visible their impact on the island and make the spaces more livable in the waiting time for the transformation of the island itself. So imagine that here there is a master plan by Zadid that was supposed to be built 15 years ago. It's still ongoing, but it will happen. And so the task of the factor in this area is really to shape this waiting time and hopefully impact the future choices of the city makers to avoid how can I say, the expulsion of these cultural and creative industries from the island. So here we had developed a completely different approach. So not so different, but in formally, yes. So we have organized 3 civic curricula with 3 universities that are partly on the island and partly in the neighborhood near the island. And we have been working with students to prototype some small solutions that can tackle these challenges. Then I think are the last 2 projects. I wanted to talk about another project in Milan. I mentioned before that I had 2 examples from Milan. So this project I think is quite interesting because is taking advantage of all this background information that we have acquired in research activities and put it into a real case of a urban competition. So maybe you are familiar with the Reinventing Cities competition format that is promoted by C40's network. This area in Milan is a very iconic place, but also very inhospitable roundabout at the moment, even though it's called the Piazzale, but it's really not a square. And so we won the competition with a team of engineers, architects, and urban planners who were really committed into creating space for people and for nature, even though not deleting the cars that are still our mean of transport at the moment. So the idea was that instead of leaving the privilege to cars, we decided to make this square really a square that is becoming a sort of peninsula of the neighborhood. So of course in the competition there was also the requirement of having a developer in order to make the initiative economically sustainable, and so we were asked to include some new buildings, but we won at least from our perspective a really hard fight in making the center of this intervention green and being able to plant trees in real soil. So basically what we agreed was to open up the metro station and to plant the trees in the floor of the metro station. So of course not where the trains are running, but in the hallway of the metro station. So the metro will become, the metro station will become an open air square, and all around we were able to include the buildings, but at the same time the entire square is able to manage its own rainwater that are flowing from the pavement to a central collection point. And on the building there will be accessible green roofs in order to extend the park, let's say, also on top of them. And still in this attempt to anticipate the change of landscape with some small institution, we were able, during the Triennale exhibition, I think was of 2021, we brought some concrete slabs symbolizing the future concrete that will be fragmented on site in the square. And also we put here the actual trees that will be planted on their square. I think I will do a very, very quick roadshow of the last slides, just to show you where our research is going to, in order to make the productivity of landscape, as we have seen it so far, even more visible, but also more quantifiable, let's say. So we have been implementing a methodology to quantify the environmental benefits of trees in landscape projects in order to integrate this service into BIM, Building Information Modeling, that is basically thought for buildings and infrastructure and not for living systems. And to do that, we base our research on I3 values, but then we created three-dimensional models that are in dialogue both with BIM and GIS. And we are able to deliver some scenarios of which ecosystem services can be improved by trees in different time scenarios. This is also one of the fundamental components that we use to assess natural capital accounting, that is more and more a key asset required in the European legislation, but also at international level to quantify the benefits and the assets of natural capital. And along this path, we were able to adapt this methodology to very targeted research fields. For example, how to mitigate vehicular traffic pollution with nature-based solutions, and how to evaluate and mitigate urban heat island effect. For example, in this case, we are developing a specific workflow with a startup called Latitudo 40 within a sub-project of the AI for Copernicus project that is called Urbalytics. And we are working on 2 cities, Milan and Naples, delivering products that are data sets showing how the urban heat island effect can be mitigated by green areas. Maybe just shortly, I will also conclude showing you this study that we are developing for the IBA Stuttgart, that is an institution in Germany that for 10 years is promoting research and projects in the area of metropolitan Stuttgart, where we translated all these research and design outcomes into a specific strategy to deliver productive landscapes for the agricultural land. That is also a key component in our metropolitan areas. And here we have been analyzing different open space typologies and their possibility to interact with agriculture, and at the same time to deliver ecosystem services, tackling climate change, but also promoting new business opportunities in rural areas. And so we developed a nature-based solution catalog that is experimented in one specific case study called Feldbach. Is a municipality not far from Stuttgart, where agricultural areas and industrial areas are quite tight together. And so we are studying how nature-based solution can be adapted also to rural areas to deliver ecosystem services and promote a sustainable integration of agriculture, landscape productivity, and urban development. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Andrea, for your incredibly interesting lecture. Just a short comment. I think that what you showed was so interesting because we saw so many different projects with different scale that together are all trying to tackling these enormous issues that is climate change is, first of all, but also how we can actually transform something that is still evolving, like you said, the cities, but also the nature is evolving maybe into a different completely speeds, but how together they can actually do something that it's completely incredible. So we will see a lot of before and after situation that demonstrate that how I think a productive landscape actually product new landscape and product knowledge and product communities also, no? When you describe, for example, the more temporary examples. So I think that we could learn so much, and then how also we can integrate new technologies like LIM or NCA that I think also that are extremely innovative and really useful to always learn from this transformation. And yeah, even if we are facing different design, we can learn from a solution to another to exploit this different vision to face yeah, our problem in our cities.